Good afternoon and welcome to the Takeup. Today we have episode 245, Back to Basics, What Pro Embroiderers Need to Know. Hey folks, welcome back into the Takeup on this Education Friday. Happy to have you guys here to have a discussion about some stuff I've been getting tons of questions about. Believe it or not, though, I do talk a lot to digitizers and do discuss digitizing and art preparation and all of that stuff in the creative realm quite a lot. The other thing I talk about is the production side of this thing and hiring. So there is a lot of what I do that also centers around helping people train themselves and employees. So it can be solo, it can be solopreneurs, it can also be people who are training themselves just for their personal career or creative career in embroidery, certainly. But I get into a little bit more than that, where I do discuss employee hires, how to handle training, skills that are good to have for embroiderers, and how to go pro. What do you do when you want to be a professional? I do mean that in a very technical term. If I tell you we're talking about commercial embroidery here, this does not mean I'm talking about a number of heads, a number of needles per machine. I'm not talking about an amount of volume or sales that you have to hit to be a pro. I'm talking about the people who are doing this as a profession. If you're doing something commercially, I'm going to trust that you are doing this professionally. And that is the concept. So even those of you who may think, hey, I'm not here to talk about doing stuff commercially, that's not my jam. If you are talking about doing something in a repeatable fashion that has good foundations of skill and training underneath it, and that may or may not be for sale, generally we end up talking about that at some point or another, then that's still in the realm of what I'm talking about when I talk about commercial embroidery and being a pro embroiderer. So don't worry about that. Plus, if you're saying, hey, I'm somebody who digitizes and that's part of what I'm doing, well, remember that I am also somebody who digitizes and has always done. So, though the topic today certainly is back to basics, what pro embroiderers need to know, you should always remember when I say embroiderers, it's always like, hey, it's pro embroiderers and digitizers. So, we're going to talk about some of the things that help us to train ourselves as digitizers. And since we're going back to basics, we're going to talk about digitizer education, something I've talked about many, many, many times here before, but we'll go over things like the three types of knowledge that all digitizers need. And we're certainly going to talk about other kinds of skills for embroiderers as well. So it's not just the standard skills that we would expect, the technical tasks, the things that we understand we need. We're going to talk a little bit certainly about soft skills, the kinds of skills that really are about what someone's basic personality and traits and types are going to do as far as helping them to be a good hire as an embroiderer, and certainly soft skills you might want to develop for yourself as someone who's in the realm of selling embroidery. And then, of course, we will get into technical tasks a bit. We'll talk about building up training a bit, and we'll get into a little bit about education in general. But we're going to actually be covering a few different things, and I'll be giving you some information from a couple of articles that I've written, as well as slide decks. You'll see a couple of slide decks and also a very poorly put together slide deck I used AI to do. Since I was talking to my good friends, the Tier guys, this morning about the uses of AI, I jammed together some stuff from one of my articles that was not currently in production and said, hey, let's see what's going to happen if I just throw this into AI without any help. And it wasn't the best, but I'll at least have a couple of visuals that aren't just banners under my talking head while we're going through this for some of that stuff. But other than that, you'll actually be getting some of the information from one of my classes. I actually have a class that I've taught several times here that we're going to get into called Debating Digitizing, where I talk about bringing in digitizing. And then also we're going to be talking about a couple of different articles I've done for both Printwear Magazine back in the day and for Images Magazine out in the UK, training to take on new machine embroidery hires, and then new embroiderers hiring from talk to training. So a couple of different articles that we're going to go over, and we'll see some of that text as well as discuss the concepts that are going from those. So you're getting a little bit of paid training and direct education right here. So that's part of it. You're getting some of the paid training you would have gotten from a trade show a couple years back, and you're going to go ahead and see some of that article material here as well. But suffice it to say, whether you are on your own, if you're doing solo education or you're hiring and training, we are going to cover some stuff that is interesting as we get there, whether you're an embroiderer, a digitizer, or both, or you are just trying to get your feet wet in the concept of this stuff. It will be helpful to you, especially as you do think about perhaps expanding and getting into the field and hiring people down the road. So with that, let's go ahead and talk to the folks who are here in the comments. As you guys know, I like to talk to everybody who's live. If you are here just to hear the topic, then go ahead and fast forward. If you're on the replay squad, that's okay. You don't have to stay and hear everybody chat. However, when the banner comes back up on the lower third, you will know that we're back into topic time. But for now, let's talk to the people who are here live. Love to see everybody. So we've got Frank from out in the UK saying, good evening. All good evening, Frank. Happy to have you in here. We've got Cindy King out in Texas saying, good afternoon from Odessa, Texas. Happy to have you here. And hi, Cindy. Glad to see you. Also, love to see everybody talking to each other. Community is one of the biggest things we can foster as we do these things for ourselves and for each other in this embroidery world. So, by all means, everybody chat with each other. It's always fantastic. We've got Gail coming in saying hi from Canada. Hi, Gail. Happy to have you in with it looks like Under the Needle Embroidery Designs and Supplies. Glad to see you here, Gail. We also have Scott coming in from Sunrise Tactical. Thank you for being here. He says, happy Friday, everyone. Happy Friday to you, too. And DJ Kev showing up. Hello, DJ Kev. Happy to have you in. And we've got Frank on multiple channels. thanks for signing up. By the way, for everybody who has been, subscriber counts are rising. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being a part of the community here and for being reciprocators, people who give back. And of course, as you know, the reciprocator, the clinker, the most critical part of our machines that makes those needles go up and down. Well, in this business, the most critical part that makes the needles go up and down is you and me. Remember that. We got Amy showing up, Amy Vogt coming in. So thank you. Hello. Happy to see you here again. Love that. And we've got everybody talking to each other. We got Brent coming in from Minneapolis. Hi, Brent. Happy to have you in. And we have Brian Bailey, Creative and Brilliance, working on some awesome stuff himself. Who is here. So, hi, Brian. We got to have a talk a little bit about some of the vagaries of AI today, since we were discussing some of that stuff earlier today. If you didn't see the Two Reeler Guys podcast, I was on the Two Reeler Guys podcast also doing a quick piece on approvals and interviews and how to get embroidery done. So, if you didn't see the Two Reeler Guys podcast this morning, you did miss out on a little bit of embroidery content. The secret sauce segment is the end of the podcast this morning. Had that up. I can throw a link up later on in the show, but we did get to talk a little bit about the process of approvals, the process of interviews, and what's important for that. You guys have heard it on this show before, but it's all produced in like a 5-minute segment that's a little bit more digestible than maybe my rants might be. But with that, let's get into it, folks. So back to basics. What do pro embroiderers need to know, right? So what I want to do is go ahead and share some things. First and foremost, I kind of want to talk about this concept of knowledge, skills, and experience, right? There's these different kind of pieces of this thing that are interesting to us. And these are different sides of what someone needs as far as an embroiderer who's going to be successful down the road. Certainly different kind of skills are there. We need to understand what we need to teach them. But I just want you to kind of catch this concept of there being different types of experience. There's knowledge, things that we know, things that have to be learned by rote. There's things that we just have to understand about our medium, about the materials. There's skills, things we have to be able to do, tasks we have to be able to take into account, and things we have to understand how to do. And then there's experience, and experience is literally what it sounds like. There is a certain amount of this embroidery experience that is going to form every part of the best part of being a producer of embroidery. And certainly we're talking about operators here, people who are actually doing production operation. There is something that cannot be taught. There is something that education really will not fully get you. You will not grok or understand below the lower jaw the way that thread and needle and stabilizer and fabric come together until we get embroidery experience at the machine. We're also going to talk a little bit about how we get that experience and how we build training. But it's just something I wanted to bring up: knowledge, skills, and experience. Knowledge we can teach. That is something that we just have to help people understand and remember. Skills need to be practiced. Yes, experience is part of that, but these are tasks that we can still train. We can develop processes for them. We can have our own strategic way of dealing with individual processes and skills. But ultimately, experience is going to hinge on getting people in front of machines if they are doing production work, getting people in front of customers if they're doing customer-facing work. There is an amount of this that just takes experience, and the understanding will not be complete until someone really is, as we say, has themselves up to the elbows in the actual work of the thing. And especially as it comes to digitizing and embroidery itself, there is no substitute for actually being on a machine and running. So what I'm going to say right now before we get it any further is that your best educator out of any of these things is to get yourself behind a machine, to make things, to prep them and to package them and to get them in front of other people. When we're talking about selling embroidery, this is important. So whether we're discussing any portion of this, certainly, like I said earlier, I talked about this on Two Earlier Guys. We're talking about dealing with customers and how we get through customer confusion. Also, the interview process, asking questions, dealing with concerns, that's another big portion of this thing. And the only real way to make that stuff work and to understand it, to get a handle on it, is to get in front of people and do the work. You will not know the fullness of it until you get out there and just get in your reps. Does this mean you have to do the scary thing? Absolutely, you have to do the scary thing. But the best part of knowing what you need to know, of becoming a pro, is on the other side of the scary thing. And I will say, from someone who certainly doesn't always trust themselves in everything they do, and certainly wants to make sure they are good at something before it gets out in the world, trust me, on the other side of the scary thing is not so much fear and not so much pain. It's really all about getting through those reps, and you will develop those feelings. And especially as we get to the concepts with embroidery production, with digitizing, that experience, including the worst of the experience, including the failures, as probably the most poignant teachers that we can get to, the most direct teachers of what we are doing, those failures are going to be invaluable. Having things fail and watching how they fail is probably the best teacher of all of these things. So, like I said, we'll get more into this, but the thing I just want to make clear is that there are real things we need to know, and on the other side of experience is the best version of understanding them. Right. So we can talk about the different kinds of skills, but certainly we have to think about what these things are. We have to think about defining roles. We have to think about technical tasks, but none of this stuff will be complete before you, if you're somebody who's learning for yourself, get out there and actually do the thing. That means making the file. That means getting it on a machine. That means running embroidery. That means hooping the garment. That means getting it out in front of people. However, it's the same with the people that you hire. If you don't get them in front of the actual machine, if you don't get them on the materials, if you don't get them understanding the thing, as we always say here from the Icelanders, below the lower jaw, if they don't get their hands dirty, they will not fully understand this thing. So you will have to get to a point where part of this training is direct experience, and where you take your hands off the reins and let somebody slightly autonomously do that work. Absolutely, training has to come first. Absolutely going to keep people safe. But this will never be complete until you let people make mistakes and learn from them, and you let people get their hands dirty. And that's something that I can be someone who will step in on someone who is at 60% of their knowledge and start doing things for them, because I don't trust that it's going to go the way I want it to go. The product's going to go the way I want it to be. And I had to learn very directly that in dealing with people, training people, you have to take your hands off the controls. There is a point where you take your hands off the controls, you take your hands off the mouse, you take your hands off the keyboard. You don't do that work for people anymore, and you let them do it. All right, we do have a great comment here, and so I'm going to bring this in. We have something from Cindy, and I love this. From Cindy, she says, "I felt pretty proud the other day. I don't do a lot of digitizing because I am the operator, but I had to build a chenille patch and add embroidery to it by myself. It was just a little scroll. That's awesome." Like I said, anytime you expand yourself into that zone that you are not comfortable, on the other end, you come out as a different person. That experience is always going to be good for you. And that's fantastic. So Sydney says, the little scroll was what I digitized. That's awesome. That's fantastic. And like I said, you're not everybody's going to be a digitizer or a full-fledged, highly competent, highly technical digitizer necessarily. But I think everybody, and this is something I'm actually going to just make a point of, I think everybody who has an embroidery machine and it runs it, especially professionally, you should know enough about digitizing to discuss it accurately, to know what you're talking about, and to make small adjustments, and truthfully, to make small designs or elements that you need, whether that is creating your own global underlays for designs that are somehow not working or were causing issues with puckering or shifting, so you can stack down your area of the design before you run the rest of the design, repairing underlays, repairing simple designs, and the most critical thing, the very basic version of this, I'm going to talk about this a little bit as we go through the rest of the skill sets, being able to adjust your own text, keyboarded text, native keyboard fonts, no matter what system you're in. If you do not know what pull, compensation, and distortion do, like what pull distortion does on the machine, and what compensation is for. This is for lengthening stitches, widening satin columns, uh, closing up gaps between things that aren't outlining correctly. If you don't know pull compensation, if you don't know what density is the measure between rows of stitching. You're looking at your satin stitch and they're further apart or closer together. That's density. More density is to make them closer together and have more thread per linear inch or linear centimeter of that satin stitch. If you don't know that that's what density is, you need to know that. If you don't know what underlay is supportive stitching that runs before the top stitching and helps to shore up edges, lift your top stitching off of the substrate. If you don't know how to adjust underlay, like let's say you've got edge run or contour run underlay that's running on the inside edge of your satin column and it's popping out, and if you don't know that you can set the inset deeper or that you can expand your pull compensation out so that those little stitches don't pop out, then you don't have control over your machine. And you now have something that you're using to make your money that you don't have control over, that you are hoping for something you're going to twiddle in a setting to make it work. The most basic understanding, the most basic understanding has to be there for anyone who's touching that machine. And I would even say operators who don't do any digitizing should still understand pull and push distortion and compensation, what underlay does and what types are the right kind for certain materials and combinations of stitches and materials, how material affects the stitch out. So when we are on different materials and things look differently, how material affects the stitch out and how material interacts with needles, because they're going to have to be working with needles, and maybe somebody didn't set the machine up right, or maybe somebody sent something back with a different material and now they've got to swap something out. They should understand what's going on there. And threads, they have to understand how thread works and how different thread weights work with density. You have to know what density does to create more coverage or less coverage. Those things are necessary even for an operator just to refer back to the person who's doing the digitizing or to the person who's ordering the digitizing. If you're doing it out of house, they have to be able to say what's going wrong in order to get a good, clean result fast. And I also think that everybody should be doing personalization in house. And generally, that does not necessarily need to be the digitizer in your system, depending on how your shop runs. Sometimes the control is really important, especially when we're talking about doing lots of personalization where you need somebody to be the point person to handle that interaction with customers and make sure that names are correct. Absolutely, there's that. But it is entirely normal to have somebody who is not a primary digitizer understand enough about text layout to drop names, to drop right chest names on a garment, and to be able to do that themselves. So super important to understand that. I think that that is absolutely critical. If you cannot control the basic, and let's just say you don't have software, I think you should. I think all of us should. Digitizing software, personalization software is not an if, that's a when. You need to have that. But even if you're not working in software yourself, you must understand as an embroiderer compensation, pull and push, density, underlay, and material interactions. That is just, for me, the technical basics. Now, we're going to talk about it again. I know I'll say all this again, but I just have to make that super clear that I think that you do not do this work outside of its medium. Embroidery, thread, and fabric is so critical. And it's an understanding that so many people are coming into this and not having. Brand new embroiderers very frequently show up, jump on the social media, super frustrated. They're unhappy about the cleanliness or the edge quality of something they've stitched out. They've dumped something through auto digitizing software and it looks terrible. And they've never looked at embroidery for any period of time, analyzed a design or known what's going on with it. And they definitely have not been led through those basic material realities of what embroidery is. They came to this with the idea that they wanted to make something. They didn't understand that it meant they had to understand embroidery. So I think that's absolutely critical, and we will get back into that. But Cindy says, thank you for the thanks. Yeah, congratulations. Happy to see you making stuff. That's awesome. You're always going to be better on the other side of it. DJ Kev has a great point here before we move on. Said, I do a lot of digitizing and running samples for the machine to dial in on efficiency. Absolutely. Absolutely. And here's the thing. Yes, everybody's going to say, oh man, I can't believe you can't run a sample every time. Yes, you can. We made millions doing it. The shops that I worked at, you can run a sample every time. Number two, if you're running multi-head embroidery, how many times do you want to dump 12 jackets into the bin to be samples from here on out? Yeah, you want to run samples all the time. And if you have any question about how a material is going to work, or what's efficient, what's not, sample is the way to find out. You got to get it on the machine to really know. Did I get to a point where I didn't need a lot of samples to do my stuff? Absolutely. I still don't need to do sampling the way I did when I first started. When I first started, it was sample after sample just to get dialed in. Now, generally, I throw something on the machine. Maybe I need a revision, and out we go. That's generally what it is. And even then, it's one revision, not 10. But how do you get there? By looking at this and understanding it. And I think lots of people are looking for the magic button that's going to cure this thing, the magic machine, the stabilizer that's going to make everything go away. But the magic button, the magic thing that's going to cure the problems you have with embroidery and with your embroidery employees, it's up here. And it's not magic, it's just education. It's just understanding and experience. It's also here. It's in your hands. It's in actually touching the materials and understanding what they do. So last couple of things. We have one more awesome one here. DJ Kev says, the embroidery business is so focused on buying machines and less on education. I appreciate this platform. Thank you so much. I like to say that I've been part of this. I've been part of trying to get people to share. I've been out there teaching almost for a decade now on the road. And before that, we are now, I don't even want to say this, I'm approaching 20 years of writing for the industry. So I've been writing the industry since I was young in the industry. I've been writing for magazines and for blogs and stuff all the way back to like 2006. So this is something I've been doing for a very long time. I like to do this type of education. In fact, today during the Two Other Guys podcast, one of the comments was, Eric always gives us these deep fundamentals. And I know it's funny because it sounds like sports talk. And I'm like, we got to work on fundamentals. But the truth of the matter is those fundamentals are the basis on which all extra creative, incredible things are built. If you know the fundamentals, everything else is built on them. They're the foundation. Absolutely, I'll tell you, just because it's the way somebody's been doing something forever doesn't mean it's the right way, and you should do new, cool, different things and use new materials. But the reality of the needle punching through the layers of thread and stabilizer and fabric does not change that much. It is super physical and you will understand it. And the best way to understand it first is to just run machines and be curious about the way embroidery works. If you are curious about embroidery and how it works and you watch how things are put together and you look at a lot of embroidery, that is a big part of the battle. Stay curious, stay interested. So Miriam says, I would love to learn digitizing and to understand all the components. I make it sound a little difficult here sometimes. I talk about it in a real technical way because I come from kind of the college education world. That's what I was doing in my young life before I started being an embroiderer. But I will say this, no matter how many technical words I use, I will try and simplify stuff down when I get goofy and get where I just want to talk technical, as I often do. The truth of the matter is, it is actually a very understandable, very physical thing that is repeatable. Yeah, it's a little fuzzy. Fabric moves around in a way that printing on a sheet of paper doesn't. At the same time, with fabric moving around and with jabbing those needles through that material over and over and over again, the thing is, we've all done this for many, many years. The work of embroidery, even mechanized embroidery previous to computerized embroidery, is so old and has been done for so long that we have a lot of understanding about how it works. There are lots of people out there teaching it. And when you get onto the machine yourself and you watch it work, it becomes very obvious. Tension is just that pull between the bobbin and the top thread. The concept of pull distortion, pull is the loop of thread under tension, pulling tight. And when it pulls tight, it tries to draw the material into the center of that loop of thread. It's no different than any loop of rope that you pull tight and it tightens toward the middle. These are really physical things that are happening on the machine. And if you watch them happen and you look at interactions with fabric, why do we see a lot of weird ragged edges on the top and bottom of satin columns when you're running on jersey knit like a t-shirt? Why? Because a t-shirt has a vertical grain on it and the thread is physically falling into that grain when it runs vertically inside of those lines. It's a super obvious physical thing that if you are curious and you notice, you will understand. All right, so enough of my soapbox. I've been soapboxing for like a half an hour here. We need to get off of that. Let's actually get back to some of the stuff we wanted to really talk about. All right, the back to basics stuff. So first things first, I want to just get into some of the skills and the soft skills and just discuss this stuff. We're gonna try to use my goofy little slide deck on the one of them. I mean, like I said, I have my professional slide deck we're gonna talk about for the 3 types of digitizing knowledge, but I'm gonna go ahead and use that other slide deck just to put something on the screen while we're chatting, because I think it's worthwhile just to have something here. Next time, if I do this, I'm going to do it more like my slide decks. I'm going to flip between the two so you can see why I am reticent to use this for talking. Because honestly, here's what AI made with my icons. It just made a generic slide deck like this. Whereas you guys know my slide decks tend to have a bit more meat to them than that. You know, we're going to talk about all these things in a minute here and discuss the 3 types of knowledge. But for right now, I'm just going to talk briefly about hiring embroidery operators and what it means and what we're talking about as far as skills and training and workflow and all that. But yeah, forgive me for the goofy slide deck that I put together. I just wanted to have something on screen that wasn't just my general banners under my head. But we'll kind of go back and forth with this a little bit because I think sometimes the general banners under my head might be a little more interesting than this version of the slide deck. And in fact, I may go ahead and make myself a little bigger here. You've already got my goofy little embroidered head down there to look at, but now you'll see me too. All right, folks. So let's go ahead and talk about this for a minute. We're going to talk about from talk to training. This is about building up production staff in multi-needle embroidery. And this is kind of just a concept I wanted to go over, what I tend to teach people. And pardon me for going out to my presentation view here really quickly. This is what I'm telling people when I'm talking to them about hiring and how people feel about, bringing in new folks and what they are looking to do. So from talk to training, we're building up skills, training, and workflow. Let's just go through some of these slides and we'll talk about some of the concepts that we have here. Why is it challenging to hire? Truth of the matter is, even though there's lots of people who are experienced in embroidery, frankly, there's not a ton of experienced commercial operators in the commercial world. Yes, they float around. Yes, you find them. But I'll tell you that in a smaller town, you end up where, truthfully, you're hiring and rehiring people who are moving around from shop to shop. It happens a fair amount when you have people who are experienced. And a lot of the new folks who come in are not experienced at all. Almost all hires are going to require some sort of training before they're in full production. And I like to say that you really want soft skills rather than just experience. Don't get me wrong. One of the things I've taught people repeatedly is if you are having trouble with people who are technically proficient with embroidery, I've kind of been shocked that nobody does tap the craft market, because there are people out there in the craft and sewing world who at the very least are able to thread a needle, who understand what thread does and what it is under tension, who know what materials are and how to use them in a way that's a lot more put together than someone who comes in from a non-embroidery background or who hasn't done any embroidery sewing. That said, there's also not a lot of people in embroidery sewing, even in the craft world, who are out there looking for these jobs. So that's why it can be hard to hire operators. But when I look at people, no matter what I'm hiring for or what I'm helping someone hire for, I like to focus on their general aptitude and a little bit about their soft skills rather than just their experience. Because I'll say this, over the course of my time working in embroidery commercially, there have been lots of people who are experienced but whose soft skills were poor and they don't last. And when I talk about soft skills, yes, this is also like fit for your shop. This is attitude toward work. This is attitude toward quality. This is ability to handle the sort of labor you want to do and the desire to keep it on track. If you don't have that, if those soft skills aren't there, there's very little that training is going to fix in that realm. I do say give people a shot. I do think you need to go ahead and think of people as an investment. However, in my experience, just being someone who's been on a machine a lot is not going to mean they're a great fit for your operation. And depending on your operation, you may find that honestly, the most experienced people, if they are not willing to learn or to work on your operating procedures, the way that you like to work, your standard operating procedures, you may find that they're actually worse than someone who's trainable, who has a good attitude. Doesn't mean that's always the case, but the thing is, I would rather have somebody with good soft skills and aptitude than someone who is super skilled, who I can tell has a massive deficit in their soft skills or their desire to learn. That is just the truth. But let's talk about a little bit of the key soft skills that I tend to look for. Attention to detail. You have to have people who can go over things with a fine tooth comb, especially in production and finishing. So somebody who's doing production, who's going through the instructions they've been given, they're doing production, they have to be a little autonomous. We're not going to be over their shoulder. You're not going to have your digitizer pecking at every single part of the sampling process. You need to have them be able to do that autonomously. They need to have some attention to detail. So if you've got somebody who just is not is not tuned in, that's probably not going to be the best thing. Communication and teamwork, absolutely. If someone, it's not that you can't prefer to work alone, and especially, hey, working solo can be fine, and you can have an operator who their best aptitude is that they're great at following tasks through, and they can handle several things. Real small shops, somebody who is a self starter who works alone is fine, but they do have to be communicative and they have to be willing to work with others, because ultimately, especially as shops grow, you end up having to specialize and you have to take things actually back off the plate of people who are multi-focus kind of people, because otherwise you can find that you'll make yourself a into a single point failure. That's something I always get accused of. I will take on too many things, and as they all pass through me, if something happens to me or if I am taxed in one of my 5 tasks that I need to do, sometimes I can then let the other 5 tasks slide. And when you do that in a small organization, sometimes that can be difficult. And in operation, when we're talking about production, it's not always the best. So you do want to look at that. They have to be able to work with a team. They have to understand how to communicate. And communication is super important, because even if it's not about, I'm not saying that somebody has to be the most personable person on earth. They can be a little quiet. They can even be a little grumpy. If someone does not communicate things that are going on, does not reach up the chain when it's necessary, will not listen to someone outside of their own office when there is an issue, you're going to have a problem. Curiosity and willingness to learn. This is absolutely my top soft skill. If someone is curious, and if they ask the right questions about the process while I'm starting to teach them, I know I can get something from them. I know they're going to be the kind of people I want to work with. Curiosity is fantastic. Yes, it can mean you got to manage people a little more carefully, because sometimes it is very difficult to have the reins on someone, because if they're very curious, they're going to go explore things. Myself included. They're going to go explore things that might not be on task. So sometimes it means you're going to have to manage curious folks. But people who have a willingness to learn also are going to track things down. They're going to find new ways. They're going to question whether or not there's some better way to operate. And if they're communicative, they're more likely to help you improve your entire process. And of course, last but not least, the ability to follow process and schedule. If you establish a process, yes, it's great. People should question that. If someone's on the floor doing the work, it's fine for them to question and give concepts back or to give feedback. In fact, it's necessary in a great employee. But if they cannot follow a process, especially if they just will not attend to a process from the get-go, the chances of that working out are pretty minimal. So those are my key soft skills that I tend to look for in people. Got a comment here from Cindy, and I totally understand this. She says, I barely let my kids touch my machines. I get it. My boys did a lot of my digitizing when they were young. If you don't own the machine, some people do not care if they wreck the machine. No, absolutely. I know I talked about getting people on the machines. They absolutely have to understand the reality of the thing. They have to know what these things cost. They have to know that they're critical, and you have to be watching these people. Also, I'm going to say this. If you are starting somebody new on the machine, I'm not telling you to walk away from them. I certainly got walked away from. I got left with machines and then left to my own devices. Luckily, I did not wreck too much on my way through them. I was given enough understanding, and I had a mentor when I first started, and she definitely made sure that I understood the reality of the machines and also the safety part of it. So I also, by the way, knock on wood, cross fingers, whatever. I have never dinged myself with a needle. I've never driven a needle through my finger or anything like that. And believe me, I have done a lot of hand trimming while designs are running. I have definitely had my hand in the hoop many, many times, but I always had a respect for the machine. You do have to train that into people. So yeah, I get it. It can be frustrating to have people touch the machines and they're not worried about it. By all means, if you've noticed that streak in someone, hate to tell you, that's probably not a great employee in the first place. That's not somebody you want to have who's there. Curiosity is one thing. Willingness to hide and sneak and do things on the machine that you don't love, not great. But the other thing I would say about that is, if you're somebody who has a wonderful, curious employee who wants to try, who is interested in this, make room for structured, observed play in that system. Make room to show them something and let them try things. Ask them what they want to do, what they're curious about, and foster some time for education that brings that into play. We do a really cool thing. You should let people enjoy it, because that is how they're going to want that path to mastery. It's why they're going to want that autonomy. It's how they're going to do more and how they're going to get better. We do a cool thing. Let them do a cool thing, but you do have to manage it. So there is a part of that time where you're going to be involved, especially as you first start. Got something from Scott. He says, lessons I learned from managing a welding shop. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. If you do your employees' work, they will let you. Absolutely. If you do the work for them, they're not going to do it. But I'll say this too. You do want to follow up, you do want accountability, but also if you never let somebody have the autonomy to do a little bit of the work and to try it on their own, the chance of them doing that later gets worse and worse, and the chances that they're going to ever become self-directed is low. So the other thing I will say is, yes, inspect, not harangue, not hover over until they're dead. You know, definitely inspect, definitely check, understand that people are going to be looking over this work. They should understand the customer looks over the work no matter what. And honestly, none of this thing, we've all seen it done. Heck, we've all probably done it. You don't take the bad one and stick it under the stack on the third position and hope nobody understands that you've done a bad design or one bad shirt. You got to teach them that when things go wrong, accountability is rewarded, that if they continue to have the same problem over and over, yes, it's problematic. But up until the point that they are not learning and they are willfully doing something, finding the problem, exposing the problem, fixing the problem, those are rewarded things. Those are things that we want to have done, not things that we want people to hide. So you can't be a monster. At the same time, it is very important for you to observe and to inspect. Yeah, if you just think something's going to happen, or here's the other thing we talk about, I like your quote here, and maybe I'm going to reinterpret it a little bit. You get what you inspect, not what you expect. Here's the other thing too. If you go from the expectations of an experienced embroiderer and then put those expectations on someone who doesn't have that experience and just think that it is something that's evident to all people, it is not. You are forgetting that when you started, you didn't understand this stuff. The things we do are not evident. They're kind of arcane. They're a little weird. You may not understand that. They're going to have to be taught these things, and it's okay for them to do that too. But that's just how it is. So that's what we got to do. And I think there's a balance here. I'm going to go ahead and bring Cindy's comment in here, but there's a balance here. Her comment was, perfection is his business. I know people say if it looks pretty, it's good. No, I'll say this. You can't get so uptight that you chase the last 5% of perfection until you don't get anything done. But you sure want to get all the way to that 95. And also judge things at the handshake distance, 3 feet, not under a magnifier when you're dealing with a customer. But for yourself, when you're educating yourself, get out that magnifier. Learn how it's getting there and get as close to that perfection as you can get. But understand that also, with the understanding that in this medium, we're punching thread through fabric. Sometimes there's going to be a little jitter at the edges. Sometimes there's going to be a little bit of slop in the piece. Sometimes things are going to shift or wrinkle a little bit. We are causing a ton of material stress on the things that we make. However, quality and the ability to consistently do a job that looks good is the entry point. If you really can't make something that looks decent and that feels good when worn, that's the other one that drives me nuts, is people who go into the digitizing side of this thing and they jam too much density into something to try and make those edges super clean on all the text, but then it feels like a brick, or it feels like it's trying to scratch you to death because it's like a file on the inside. Yeah, too much embroidery. Also, it's stiff and bulletproof, and it sticks up on your chest and it folds out and it's heavy on the garment. The entire experience of wearing and owning the garment over time is the experience that the customer is buying from you, not just what it looks like when you pop open the box. But the barrier to entry, just to be here, just to be part of the team, is to make good work that looks decent, that runs relatively efficiently, and that you're delivering on time. Those things are just, that's not, I'm the best embroiderer in the world. That is the entry level. That is the barrier to entry and to sailing. That doesn't mean, that is not beyond any of us. Doesn't mean that's something to worry about. That is not beyond any of us. We can all do that. Any of the equipment we can buy today will do those things. It is not an equipment thing. It's not a software thing. It's what's up here, and it's time spent on the machine, and it's understanding how to justify those things together. Let's go back to the operator stuff for a little bit before we get into some digitizer stuff. You guys know I have to get to the digitizer stuff eventually, but let's get into the operator stuff. First thing, define the role of the operator. What does an operator do? Operator prepares jobs, so they have to get things ready for work. Obviously, they're not just going to be handed literally everything into the point of operating the machine. Operators that I understand, or the kind of operators I want, are also able to prepare a job, to load the machine, to get a file placed, to do all those things that they need to do to get the job running. Running the actual production on the multi-needle machine. So, of course, if we're talking about commercial production, even if someone has done embroidery on single needle, I want to see them understand the ins and outs of the multi-needle machine enough to handle all the pieces that go into that. Yes, that means understanding the operation of the head units and the stuff that goes on the particular machine. Of course, they're going to have to know that, but you're going to train that in. All right. Machine maintenance, basic machine maintenance. I'm not talking about tech repairs. I'm not talking about timing necessarily. We're not going that far, but you do have to be able to clean and oil and handle basic tensioning on your machine. I think that's important enough, and record those things that are there. And then after this, the other thing that I do put in the operator role, of course, is recording production data. You may not decide to do time studies on every job you've ever done. So, time studies being where we literally run the job and we talk about each step in the job and we record how long it took us to do each step and how long it took us to get through the entire job. That's a time study. We're not saying we're necessarily doing that kind of level of data on every single job. However, if you have an operator who cannot record correctly what rejects were there, that is not taking care to understand what's happening on the machines, who's not recording when production gets done, who's not sending that information to the next person in the chain, whether that's in finishing or whether that's in shipping and delivery or pickup, whatever that is, someone needs to be able to record production data reliably and put it where it goes, to put notes where they need to be, to go back to whatever system it is you use for job management and place that data back where it needs to go for the next person. And for in perpetuity, when you go look it up later, you can have that information. You have the notes that are there that are important. These things are all important, I would say, for the operator role. So yeah, preparing jobs, running production, multi-needle machines, machine maintenance, and recording production data, just all part of this jam. It's just stuff that they need to be able to do. It's not arcane. That is just what we have to do the work. Preparing jobs first is the digital portion of it. So these are things you're going to have to train people on. Loading stitch files. So I will say this, you do probably want to have some sort of central location where digitizers are placing stitch files. Usually it's going to be networked. You may have a digitizer placing stitch files on machines for your operators, depending. But generally, they're going to have to learn how to load stitch files correctly and how to set things like needle order and stops. Yes, there are machines and processes by which that can be set from transfer files, but that's not necessarily the basic version of this thing. They do need to still be able to alter those things in case it's necessary. You should be able to alter your color changes and color orders and things on the machine. And even if that means, yes, my digitizer, who also makes a transfer file format for my machine, messed up my sequencing, the operator should not be sitting there twiddling their thumbs waiting for that to get corrected. They should be able to set the needle order and stops and handle things like applique and things like that. Tracing the design in the hoop, verifying placement and size. They have to be able to be technically capable and also proficient enough and detail-oriented enough to do all these things. Then there's the physical preparation of the job. We want to be able to stage garments by size and color. That's something they need to be able to do. Yes, I know that sounds like, wow, to be able to. Trust me, not everybody's thinking this way. They need to do that, and it's something you need to teach them how to do and why to do it the way they do. So size and color, why do I say that? Because when you're doing things like personalization, you likely on the digitizing side are going to be preparing files in such a way that you do things like team name groupings by size, by number of heads on the machine, and by color, so that you can make sure that things stay the way they need to be for not only color changes or palettes that are on each particular design or on each particular garment, but staging them by size so it's really easy to run your production and not have to be switching individual heads and saying there's a large on this head and an XL on this head and a double XL on this head. It should be runs by size as much as you can for large personalized jobs. Threading machines and checking the bobbins, for real. There's no excuse on this one. You need to be able to do that stuff and also oil your machine at the beginning of your run or at the midpoint of your shift. And certainly adjust tension and hooping. Now, most operators, you shouldn't be tweaking tension all the time, but when there's an obvious tension problem, I don't want to see an operator sitting on their hands waiting for someone to come fix that. They need to be able to adjust tension. They need to be able to hoop garments correctly, and they also need to be able to make any adjustments to the hoop that are necessary for the particular stack of garments and stabilizer that are there. This means understanding hoop tension. This means understanding how stabilizers work to some degree. Yes, that's probably something you're going to prescribe as a digitizer. At the same time, you do want them to be able to adjust the hoops as necessary and to know why you use certain stabilizers so that they don't just grab a stack of whatever and stick it on there. Yes, I know it sounds crazy. But there are definitely production folks I have known who have been in the business longer than you would think and who literally just put what's in front of them inside the hoop. And that's something that we should not tolerate. I think that's just a lower level of operation that we should have. Running jobs. They have to know proper hooping and positioning. You're not necessarily going to, as a digitizer, set everything up and say, I've got a hoop master with this code on it. Operators should understand how to hoop correctly so that on large sizes we're not off into the armpits, let's say. They need to understand how a garment lays and how to place that stuff. Even if that means you need to make jigs as a owner of a shop or as someone who's managing the jobs, if you need to have jigs or assistants or anything else to help them where they get some assistance, including, like I said, hoop masters or hooping stations that have numerical values for different size shirts, things like that, that's fine. But they need to understand why they do that and where things should be hooped for basic left, right, chest, sleeves, yokes, what have you. Starting and stopping the machines. Yes, absolutely. They need to be able to start and stop the machines and in case of emergency, be able to back them up, to understand how to reverse and start at a stitch position. These are things that people are often not thinking of. I find people buying new multi-needle equipment and they're absolutely shocked when they don't know how to reverse inside of sequence or start things at a particular stitch or place something in the hoop in such a way that they can make repairs. Handling thread breaks, monitoring stitch quality. You can't keep running if you're starting to get loops or some other tension problems on one of your heads. You have to have somebody who is conscious enough that if they're working on multi-head equipment, even though they can be doing other work, they need to be scanning down the embroidery field once in a while and saying, hey, I'm looking at all the garments and yep, the fills are all going well, tension's all going well, rather than waiting till the end of a run and finding, 2 out of 8 heads are currently looping like crazy and now we've wasted those garments. You need to be monitoring once in a while, even if you're hooping while you work. So machine maintenance, as I talked about, regular needle changes, just to understand how to do it, how to set them correctly for the machine, and what kind of needles are required. Certainly, even though you could prescribe this in your system, you could prescribe this in your notes, understanding why we use a certain needle type, why we use sharps versus ballpoints, or if that's something we're doing in our shop in that particular venue, why we use certain needles, why we use certain threads, things like that. Cleaning the thread path. Yes, you just got to maintain your machines. If you don't clean your thread path, you will get lint and mess in the thread path or in the bobbin area, and you will affect the tension of your thread over time. You got to clean your machines. You got to clean your thread path. Lubrication and oiling, of course, they need to understand the schedule for your particular machine and the oiling points that are there, and then any other sort of preventative maintenance that's required. So yes, cleaning, stuff like that. Certainly all the digital stuff and cleaning stuff out there too, because sometimes you have things like file backup, stuff like that. Should be able to handle all that stuff. And certainly all of the physical maintenance has to be done to the machine, whether it's cleaning, oiling, anything else. And to understand when there's wear, to make sure that if they are getting into a tech situation where we need to have somebody in, that they're communicating that up to the front. Then recording production, we'll kind of go through that. And like I said, we're not going to beat all of this into the ground, but we're going to go ahead and kind of finish this up here. Recording production, I want to see people who are tracking garment counts as they come off the machine. So this means we're not waiting until we are at the end of this. Not to mention also as part of the preparation, the physical preparation, they are counting in and then counting out. So you're counting in to make sure you have everything you need for production. You're counting your intake garments against the order. And then you're going to be tracking garment counts on the way out for any sort of rejects or things that have to be replaced, things like that. They're going to document rejects and issues. That means when there is a reject, when there is something that has gone wrong in the process of production, they need to document that issue and take a note and communicate that note clearly. So someone needs to understand what's going on for that. So documenting rejects and issues. These are skills we have to have. Yes, I know it sounds like a basic skill. People are not drilling this into their operators enough. Record timing and production data. Like I said, we're not maybe going to do time studies on every single thing. We should do some time studies, especially as we start in the industry and especially as we start each person in their particular position. It's a great idea for them to time how things are going so we can kind of keep an eye on how that production is going and are we getting better? Are we getting faster? Are we staying efficient? And also, I like to see that as improving repeat orders. They should improve over time. And as they are recording this stuff, that should be in their mind when they come to the next round. If they're recording these things that happen in the reject column, they should be not only communicating those up for when there are problems where it requires a digitizer or a salesperson or whoever to understand that, hey, we're having a problem with this kind of garment. Hey, this file type is going this way. Maybe things aren't being produced correctly for X situation. Fine. But they should be using this knowledge to help improve repeat orders. And this part of this just means that they are cognizant of the body of work they're doing. If someone's curious, they're going to arrive at this pretty easily, but it's something that you need to communicate when you first hire people in. So with this, we'll go briefly into training strategy on this. I know I'm running through slides, but I'm going to go ahead and go through these because I think it's worthwhile saying, okay, how are we going to get that education? And I mean, like that's the thing we want to get to. This is what I think is important for us, is that we actually have a lot of resources out there. Everybody's always asking me, how are we going to get this training into people? How are we going to get them to understand these things? Well, number one, if you don't have resources built yourself already, we do have a lot of manufacturer resources. So lean on those things. Your machine manufacturers, your thread manufacturers, your stabilizer manufacturers, or vendors are going to have documents for this stuff. They're going to have quick reference charts for thread tension. They're going to have instructional guides for using your tension gauges. And yes, I think you should have tension gauges in your shop if you're running commercial hardware. Now, modern commercial machines, there are now commercial machines out there commonly that have electromagnetic or other sorts of automated tensioning. That's then part of the machine operation. They should understand how that runs and how tension works and what effect it has on your sew outs. But keep tools and gauges at each station. That's your job to make sure that you do that for your production people. And then hands-on learning. Last but not least, always run people through the tasks, especially if you are someone who's been doing all this work yourself and you're starting to bring people on. You want to use hands-on learning to get them through this stage. They need to understand it. So I say combine the manufacturer resources, which what I call with the other thing is internal SOPs, that is standard operating procedures. Record some stuff. Record some stuff. You actually have to go through the way you do the work and record what you do, write it down step by step, and make training documents. That's where things like AI can help. If you make notes and say, here's this thing, I want to make it into a checklist, into a training document, that actually can help. But make notes and walk through your process, but literally do a job and walk through the process. Don't just do it in your head. Or if you have a question about it, don't just do it in your head. Go through a job yourself as someone who's done this. Generally, when you're hiring, you are someone who has been doing the work up until this point. Go through the job yourself and write down every little thing you do. And I know it sounds crazy and it makes you want to go nuts for all of the extra detail you're putting into it. But at the end of that process, you will start to know not only everything that you do in the process that goes through that flow. And I like flow charts. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but I do. I like to make flow charts. Go through every process, every decision that you make, write every single thing down. The other thing you're going to notice is where you are inefficient, and you might start to develop these, internal SOPs that we got over here. You can develop your own procedure. As you write the procedure down, you may actually find things to trim and to improve for yourself. So that's also useful. And also, even if you're just training yourself, doing a job and writing things down and saying, hey, is there a better way for me to do this? Walking through every step and doing that recording can very much help with that. So last but not least, these are the things that I think we have to understand and the types of things we need to learn. And I'm going to get back into this with digitizing very quickly after this. We have to learn the medium. So fabric behavior. How do things stretch? Woven fabrics that are even woven stretch on the bias on the 45 degrees and the 135 degrees. Knowing that means you'll know when things are stretching because it's the grain of the fabric. Things like jersey knits, you got a bunch of vertical fills. They're going to be ragged on top and bottom. They're going to have weird covers and they're going to stretch the heck out of the garment. Why? Because you're putting the orientation of push, stacking all your density together in that vertical. It means that push where the stitches start to stack together is going left and right, going toward the stretchiest dimension of that jersey knit fabric. Understanding things like that, pull and push distortion, how hooping tension affects something. So how tight something is hooped, whether it stays stable in the hoop or if it slips. Those things are important. And then hands-on machine experience, just literally watching the machines run. You got to get people in front of the machines, let them watch them run, let them watch the needles and thread distort the material. Because distortion is certainly something you can teach. I can show it to you. I can show you charts. I can show you, documents that explain all of it. But how you're going to learn it the best is to get a garment in the hoop, throw a design on it, watch it run, and watch how the direction of the stitch angles, the density of the object, how tightly packed it is, the angle at which it lays on the garment, and the interaction between different blocks of thread, different blocks of embroidery, how those things all interact teaches you so much. And the apparent motion of the needle through the design. Now, yes, we know it's the garment moving and the needle stays still, but the motion of the needle through the apparent motion of the needle through the design will also push things around, will move things in the hoop. And if you watch it with a curious eye, you'll start to understand how designs are put together. It's good for digitizers, especially, but it can also help embroiderers communicate back to a digitizer when something's wrong. It's not just the outline looks like crap. It's when this thing started running, the filled area got narrower here and it pushed toward this direction as it was running forward, and the outline now has a gap on this side, and now the fill is pushing past the outline right here as the design was filling toward this spot, or as this border was moving I could see it pulling in, and when it was pulling in it moved off center. These are things we can notice, and on top of it, things like hooping tension, we can look at our hoop and say, I saw the material starting to pull in the hoop. I saw when it hit this part of the hoop, it was pulling here, it was puckering here, it was sliding because the material was sliding in the hoop, was too slippery, or was in maybe a rectangular standard compression hoop where on the sides we get some looseness. And we understand that we can talk to our digitizer and say, hey, when something is at this angle on this particular material, or I've got this seam on this garment, and when I hit the seam, this is what's happening. That hands-on machine experience, that understanding is something you can't miss. So building your training path, we want to document your daily workflow. Like I said, if it's something you're talking about your standard operating procedures, if you haven't hired somebody yet, break your document, break those jobs into those teachable steps. So once we document that daily workflow, we look at jobs and we say, what is a teachable step? What are the elements we actually have to get done? Allow trainees to observe and run short jobs, and then use feedback and finish samples for learning. Show somebody how it should turn out, have something complete and show them what it looks like, and show them the original designs, show them the materials that go into it, and have them see that finished sample as a way that they learn. So I think that's important stuff. Like I said, that is really what I'm after for operators. But the next thing I want to talk about really briefly, I did want to discuss digitizers a little bit. I mean, there is more to all this, but certainly I think we can go into digitizing a little bit and the 3 types of knowledge. And I think it's worthwhile to get that out. So for digitizers, if you are training in digitizing, you're teaching yourself digitizing, the one other thing that we get into is that people get really focused on software skills. Yes, they're important. You're going to have those, but you need to make sure that you have all 3 of what I call the 3 types of knowledge that digitizers need to do their best work. So pro digitizers, these are things you need to have. And I'm going to talk about a little bit beyond the 3 types of knowledge, but for digitizer education, there's these 3 top types of knowledge that I think you need. I'm going to cover those before I kind of go off into the slightly the soft skills area, the stuff that you might not think is technically the same. We're going to talk about that, as well. We're going to talk about stuff outside of this technical skill, but I do want to get into the 3 types of knowledge and education just to kind of cover how digitizers figure into this. And what I'm going to say is, digitizers, you are not exempt from getting on the machine and watching things run. In fact, you need it more than anybody. So if you're somebody who's coming to the digitizing world from graphics and you have not been running a machine yet, you haven't gotten time on one, go volunteer if you have to, get yourself in front of a machine, find a makerspace that has one. You're not going to be fully cognizant of how embroidery works until you run. I was an operator first. Certainly, I was digitizing so soon after operating that it's hard for me to say that. We're talking a matter of months. I was into it very quickly, but at the same time, the time I spent operating as a digitizer is the only reason why later on, when I was a primary digitizer, was no longer an operator, why I didn't have to go back and forth and constantly mess with things. Why I was pretty successful as a digitizer was because I was an operator during that initial time. And because I spent so much time running my own stuff, eating my own dog food, running my own designs so I could feel the pain of how they worked and didn't work. I think it's something that you cannot avoid. But again, let's talk about 3 types of knowledge. I think it's worthwhile to do. Like I said, sometimes it's fun to do the presentation thing. At least we can kind of have a visual in front of us while we're talking. I will change my my layout a little bit if I can. Let me throw myself into the bottom corner and make myself a little smaller. Maybe we can get a little bit more of the actual slide deck in here, since this is one of my designed slide decks, not something that I jammed through OpenAI's ChatGPT stuff. I did actually go ahead and make this one myself. Now, I think I could have prompted a better one, but the piece I just did, I went ahead and just wanted to have something in front of you guys while we were talking today. But let's talk about the 3 types of knowledge here. First type of knowledge that we need for digitizers to learn their craft and to become pros, we have to have material and equipment knowledge. So first off, basic machine function, absolutely. Thread, needle, and fabric interaction, 100%. This is the same thing we talked about before. We're using sharps because we have a heavy knit or a heavy woven, and we want to pierce through the bundles of thread that go into making that woven garment. That's why we're using sharps. We're using a ballpoint because we have something that's a knit that if we snag it, we're going to end up causing a run. So we might use a ballpoint. We need to understand that. Or simple things like if I've got a heavy thing with ribs on it, like a rib knit or a corduroy, then I know that vertical stitch is going to drop into that sucker. We need to understand fabric interactions. The effects of stabilizers. Why do we use stabilizers and why should they be there in any particular configuration? People will just tell you to use a big stack of all these different stabilizers, and they really don't discuss what the material qualities of the thing is. Why do I call them stabilizers instead of backing? Because they're supposed to arrest the movement and stretching of the material in order to preserve it while you're moving that needle through it and doing the process. You're stabilizing that material for the work. That's why I don't tend to call it backing, because it's not just something to cover the back. It's something that is actually doing a job. Tension. How does tension work on the machine and how do we adjust it? And certainly, what does it do to the look of your fills, your satins, what have you? And hooping. You should know these things. Why? You're like, I'm a digitizer. I'm not going to be an operator. If you don't know what hooping can make wrong in a design, or if you don't know how hooping affects it, well, then when someone comes back to you with a sample and tells you they weren't watching it, but here's the sample and this is how it turned out, you can talk to them and say, hey, I'm seeing here's the kind of hoop you were using. This is what the hooping could do. This is something that's slippery, that's sliding in the hoop. Here's puckering that's happening because it wasn't arrested nicely. Or let's say we've got a cap and it's not framed correctly. It can cause all manner of havoc with the cap if it's not correctly placed in the frame. So other stuff. Let me move my little head again. There we go. I'll be in the picture with the rest of the garment with my lovely old Tajima machine. I miss it. My old Tajima multi-head, one of the newer of the ones that I worked on at the time, but now is quite, I think, venerable is the nice way to put some of the machines I've worked on over time. Let's talk about the embroidery and digitizing knowledge. Okay, this is the stuff that is, I'm glad people talk about, but still is not everything we need to know. This is stitch types and properties. What are the stitch types and what properties can we change about them? What can you change about a satin stitch? What can you adjust to adjust its quality? What can we adjust about a fill stitch to change its texture, to change how it lays in the garment? What do stitch angles do? All of the properties that go into each object and how that affects the look of the final piece. Art interpretation. How do I achieve this shaded element? Certainly. How do I break up a letter into the shapes that it needs to be so that satin stitches work, like we talked about last week? How do we interpret this image into thread, into the medium that we're using? Density and underlay. We talked about that already. How do we handle that spacing between those rows of stitching? And what does that do to our garment, the way it feels, the way it runs? And underlay, what does underlay do to support our stitching? Distortion, compensation. What's happening on the material in the hoop? Pull, push. How do we control those things? How do we compensate for them? And then angles, overlaps, and constructions. How do different blocks of embroidery interact with each other? How do the stitch angles matter when they interact with each other? How does it matter how much they're overlapped or not? And construction in general. How do we construct a design? And how do we deal with the construction of garments to some degree? So angles, overlaps, and construction. That's our second type. So that's kind of our second type of knowledge there that we need to know. Third type, software operation. And the reason I show this image of of some software here, usually you see me in Stitch Artist 3 where we have the draw ribbon up at the top, or we have the kind of the interface that is contextual, it changes. The first time I got released onto Wilcom can give you that kind of that cockpit feeling. There's a lot of controls everywhere. This is why people get freaked out about this stuff, especially in the commercial world. A lot of commercial software, especially up until recently, had lots of like buttons all over the place. Unlike when like I said, we usually see them in Stitch Artist, it's context aware, so you only see the same kind of area with controls. Whereas you can really have a screen full of controls sometimes when you open up a commercial software before you adjust it to your needs. So understanding that can be really hard for a lot of folks. Certainly, the other stuff is very necessary in all software, the actual operation. But people they get this focus. They're like, man, there's all these tools everywhere. You're probably only ever going to touch 10% of it in most of your designs. It doesn't mean that those other tools aren't useful. The truth of the matter is, though, the most basic stuff is going to be stuff you touch all the time. It's not going to be every control that's on there. And the most critical values aren't about those controls and all the different things that the software can do. It's about the things that you actually have to operate on in each time that you're working. And that's art adjustment and manipulation, how to get art into your software and work on that art, drawing and assigning variables. How do you draw and manipulate points? You see me talking about this all the time, drawing nodes, manipulating curves, why I talked about Bezier editing versus spline editing. It's stuff that's super highly technical. At least it sounds like it is, but it once you get involved in the actual drawing, it's not. It's not that technical. It is more about repetition and use, but it freaks people out. And so I think you got to get in there and just draw. You have to learn how to draw lines and learn how to control what they're going to do, depending on the nodes that you use and the way that you handle things like Bezier handles or the number of spline points and where you place them on line. So drawing and assigning variables, important. Editing, sequencing, and settings. You have to be able to go back and make edits. You have to be able to understand how to sequence a design to make sure that it runs in an order that is both efficient and, because we're going to understand already all of that material stuff that we talked about before, we're going to know that the motion through a design can change how things like registration and borders fall and things like that, because we're going to have run designs and understood that stuff. So sequencing is important, and also how to sequence. When you're in an object tree, when you're looking at a design, how do you drag things into place and put them where they need to go so that when they're on the machine, they run in the order they're supposed to and in the layering they're supposed to. That's important. And then last but not least, file export and configuration. How do I get the right kind of files for my production crew and to get them also the right information out of my software? And how do I configure that file to do what it should do at the machine to make production easy for my production people? That is important for Digitizer. That's part of the software knowledge. And the funny thing is, we get focused on software operations sometimes, and we forget the rest of this stuff. We forget both material knowledge and art interpretation. This stuff is a little fuzzier. It's harder to get a handle on. And a lot of this is about that curiosity. It's about looking at designs, it's about looking at embroidery and understanding how to make marks with thread. Certainly. And a lot of the machine function stuff like that is about practice, about going and being an operator. And the thing is, you might say, okay, a lot of that stuff I'm not going to handle as a digitizer. Someone else is going to maybe be running my files. If you don't know what they need to do once they have your file in hand, you aren't going to prep them for it correctly. And also, if you're an expert digitizer who is servicing people outside of your shop, they are going to come to you for answers when things are wrong. And if you know nothing about the file operation portion, if you know nothing about the way machines operate, you're not going to be able to, number one, create a design that's efficient for the machine. Number two, help them through their problems when they come to you with very common questions that should be at least within your power to give them some insight, even if you can't tell them how to operate their particular machine. So those are the three types of knowledge: materials and equipment, embroidery and digitizing, software operation. This is the one that I kind of focus on with people. This is the big thing that sometimes makes me unpopular. The why is more important to me than the how. If you don't know why you want to put stitches somewhere in a particular configuration, how you draw that shape is going to be less important to you overall. I can make sure anybody can learn how to draw a shape, especially I have nice tools. I talked to you guys about all the wonderful things we can do in Stitch Artist with our nodes and with our curves and with editing in our previous episode. If you don't know why you're doing that, you won't even know where to start drawing those shapes. You need to know why you would want stitches somewhere and why they should look a certain way, or why you want them to look a certain way. So if you don't know why you would create a block of stitches and how they'll behave before you learn how to create it, you're going to be lost. Drawing is great. You can learn this stuff in any order, but you're going to do better if you know more about embroidery before you worry too much about how to draw shape. So why to me is more important than how. Not that they aren't both important. In fact, if you don't know all three of those kind of qualifications of knowledge, you'll never be at your full potential as a digitizer. So how do we acquire the knowledge? Pretty simple. I've said it a million times. Get on a machine. You got to get on a machine. You got to run machines. It is just what you have to do. If you want to be an embroiderer, you got to embroider. That's not only the technical definition of the thing, it is just important. You got to get embroidery experience. And like a much younger Eric here, you just got to get behind that machine and thread it up and learn the weaver's knot and pull them through and run designs, and run lots of designs if you can. Design analysis. You want to measure designs. You want to look at things. You want to measure stitch lengths. You want to see what densities are in designs that you know run well, or designs that you like. Look at those designs and say, I've done tons of episodes on design analysis. What is the stitch angle like? How long are these stitches? How far apart are they? What are these different groupings together? What are these shapes? How much do they overlap? And look at embroidery, the number of people, and this, I'm going to pull myself into the full screen for this. The number of people I talk to on a weekly basis that want to embroider and don't seem to know what embroidery looks like, have never seen an embroidered letter in a satin stitch broken up into pieces for some reason. It blows my mind. I stop them, and especially because somebody will be coming to me with a design that is of a very common thing, or a very common logo, maybe, or a logo type, or a font. And I'm like, so did you go online and look for examples of stuff like what you want to make? And they have not. And they're fighting because they make something, they make something with the quickest tools they can find. They worry too much about operation in the window. And then when they get to run the thing, they're like, this doesn't look like everybody else's embroidery. And I'm like, because you haven't selected the type of stitches they did. You have not looked at any other embroidery and tried to copy the way that it's built. You have not looked at any examples of anything similar to what you want to do. And you very much have not taken a file that you like and just looked at how it's built or watched the sequence and how it's run. And these are sometimes people who've embroidered for a fair amount of time. Sometimes it's not. Pretty often it's people who decide they want to do embroidery and they buy a machine and software at the same time and then start slamming auto-digitizing stuff or filling big areas with fill stitches, and they jam them on a machine and they're very frustrated that it doesn't automatically turn into this thing that's very thoughtful and crafted that somebody like me or you, if you've been digitizing for any period of time, really spent some time learning how to take apart and put together. It's common. And that's the thing. Go look at embroidery. Go experience it on the machine. Analyze designs. It is critical. If you see something you love, ask yourself how it was put together and take some notes. You got to stay curious. It's the only way to get through this thing. So we've got some comments. So I'm going to go ahead and grab some really quickly before we get done here. We've got some for sure. So we talked about the machine stuff again. Cindy says, unless your mother will not let you touch the machines. LOL. Yeah, I know. I know. Sometimes you're protective of your machines. I understand. But if you want the help, sometimes you got to train the help. We have a couple other things here. She says, the new stabilizers are so wonderful. Yeah, the new stabilizers that are out there. Back in the day, we had cutaway and tearaway and nothing else. Yeah, well, now the new stabilizers that are available are much better. And honestly, there's much more than we get to use. In the commercial embroidery world, there's a lot more out there that we don't get to see. We have a couple folks in here. Also, you'll love to see, if you guys are coming out to the Impressions Expo soon, you'll see Applicate Joe Kramer is here. So glad to see you here, sir. He says, hey, happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for being here, sir. You'll see us teaching Technique Toolkit really soon. So, a couple weeks now, if you're out in the area, you're going to go to Atlantic City, make sure you sign up for our class and for Joe's classes. And you also, Katie Woodman is out there. We're all teaching, and we'd love to see you guys. So please come out to Atlantic City. It's coming up soon. Go to impressionsexpo.com if you want to see that. Coming up real soon. And in fact, I'll just go ahead and put this on screen for you really quickly. If you're thinking about coming out to Impressions Expo out in Atlantic City, this link will get you there. And if you use promo code SPEAK207, you will get 20% off of a full conference pass. Full conference pass lets you go to all of the seminars you want to go to. And there's lots to go to, lots of good ones. So last couple of people talking about stuff for sure. But let's go ahead and just make sure and push this real quick one more time. Joe says, hey, Eric Campbell, I hope you're getting ready for Impressions Expo Atlantic City. Yes, I am. We're going to crush it. Anyone that comes, I'll be so excited to meet up with you all. And you should be excited to meet up with Joe. He is awesome. I got some questions for you too, dude. And we got to actually we have to have our little confab. We're going to do some talking about Stitch Artist here real soon. So you and me, my man. And also Katie too. I got to get you guys back in on that call, but you guys don't know that. Just show up to the show. We're going to be there. We're going to be teaching. It's going to be cool. Also, we're doing the big round robin discussion where we talk at the round tables and you get to ask us questions directly. Imagine you're doing this, but instead of me just talking through the comments, you could get in my face and ask me the questions, and Joe's face and Katie's face. You got to do that. Anyway, all right. So thank you guys for being here. Certainly, I'm going to go ahead and finish this up strong as we can. We'll go ahead and go back out to the screen share just for a second. We'll go ahead and finish this up. We talked about design analysis real quick. Move myself over to the corner again. I'll probably wish I'd moved myself somewhere else. But the other stuff we need to do, documentation. This is for some old software I had. It's a little more complicated than usual. This is an older, an older slide deck. This is one that I had out when I was teaching the DAX shows earlier on. But still, look at your documentation. There's lots of good stuff out there. We've got good documentation in our software. Read it. If you're a digitizer, go look at it. And also go look at the documentation from by the way, before I move on out of this, and yes, I realize I can't move myself anywhere good here. Um, look at the documentation from your manufacturers as well, as far as, pardon me, guys, as far as handling your not only your software but your materials. Go look at the material sheets. Go look at the charts that they have for you. Go look at all this stuff. It's worthwhile. Look at what's there. And people like Brian Bailey, who's here himself, has written extensively on the software that he created. There's a ton of stuff in there, and I've even written some stuff on our software. Go and look at that supplemental material when you go download your software. There is a manual that's generally built in. There's also online manuals. There's often supplementary materials to help you learn particular techniques, and your vendors are going to give you stuff. Not to mention, you can get documentation from classes. Experimentation. Don't forget to get yourself in front of a machine. Even if you got an old clunker, this is my old brother BAS 415. How I miss her. I did a lot of my best work on this old brother back when brother had big metal commercial machines that were kind of Tajima head clones. These machines were fun, and I ran this sucker into the ground. And this is a 9-needle machine that did not have a screen on it, that didn't have any other fancy bells and whistles, but I made some of my best pieces on it. Getting materials under the needle is the best thing you can do. You got to do it. So get out there, experiment, work on a project, self-directed projects. Go back into the archives of this show and look up self-directed projects. Look up design analysis and experimentation. Make some stuff for yourself. Make the weird thing you always wanted to. Embroidery's cool. We get to do a cool job. We might as well enjoy that job while we're doing it. And certainly community. You see here, this is just a piece of Stitch Artist Digitizing fans. You guys know that this is Facebook. There are other places where it's happening. You're here with a community of people here too. By all means, get into the community and talk. You can see here, this is me and Lisa telling somebody all about stitch types and handling large type and handling the transition from satins into broken stitches like length limit fills, auto split fills, or turning to Tommy stitches. This is something you can just have. People are there. You have people you can chat with. Also, you can see, including Ramona, who's often here, is in my contacts list down there. I never noticed that before. I've got some people in my contacts list who are live, and among them are some industry experts. Use social media for the thing it's supposed to be. Social. Get over there. Talk to people in groups. Facebook groups are still fantastic, despite the fact that Facebook people think people are aging out of it. Well, it is still a place where there's a ton of incredible activity going on in the technical world. And also get out there into other communities. Go talk to other chats. Go be in other lives. Show up at community events as well. Go to do direct education and talk to the other people there. Don't just talk to Joe and me. Don't just talk to Katie when she's up front. Talk to the other people who are around you and get that community support. There's direct support from your manufacturers, absolutely. There's direct support from your software companies. There's direct support from your vendors. But there's also a world of community support. Now, not everybody's going to have the experience that you need or to know are going to be necessarily on the same level as you might like. But getting out into the group, by the time you have enough people together, there are going to be some helpers that kind of rise to the top. You'll see people like myself, who are out there in the groups trying to help, who are providing technical information that you can tell is functional because they know what they're talking about. People trust them. You see the social proof of the other people in the group listening to them and talking with them, and you often will see samples of their work. But also, just talk to each other, because the other thing you need is community support in a more general way. You need community support just to kind of get through the work, right? The work can be hard. What we do can be hard. And then, of course, there's a direct education. Then you have my smiling face showing up there, and that's me talking about good designs, analysis, and repair. I've taught that one a few times. And you're going to see me out in Impressions Expo soon. So by all means, go get direct education. Take classes. And like I said, it's not just classes, it's classes and the people who are around you that are the people that are the reason to take these classes. The people who are around you are going to be a resource for you, just the way that direct education is, just the way that the actual materials and the handouts and the slide decks and everything else will help you. Certainly what's going to help you is being around that community as well. But direct education is fantastic, especially if they're covering a topic that's important to you. What I would say is, if you get one thing out of it, that's the thing too. Don't put your eggs in one basket and think you're going to go to my class and you're going to show up at my class. And by the time you leave this hour and 15 minutes I have with you, or the 4 hours we have with you during Technique Toolkit, and we are going to just turn you entirely around. We can't teach you everything in a class session. we can teach you something that is highly useful. If we teach you one thing that saves you a couple minutes per job for the rest of your career, you cannot overestimate the value of what you just learned. So go and learn what you can from direct education while you have a chance. But let's not go past that. Sorry, I jumped into my next slide. We're not going to go into the rest of that slide deck. We're going to finish up here. This is enough time that we've taken today. But I think there are some things to lean back on and just to kind of cover and say, what did we learn today? What did we understand? We want to go back to the basics and say, what do the pro embroiderers need to know? Well, there's a few things pro embroiderers and of course, digitizers need to know. No matter whether they are solo, teaching yourselves, you're trying to learn, or you're hiring and training, the thing is, number one, don't ignore the soft skills. Curiosity, willingness to learn, desire to experiment, attention to detail, super necessary things to have for any one of these positions and for yourself as someone who wants to get educated, to digitize, to embroider professionally, or to just become a pro level embroiderer. You want to level up, then those soft skills are really important. Do the technical tasks. You have to do those. I mean, obviously, we do need to understand the technicality of what this is, and to get the reps into practice. So remember, you can build the training if you've already done the work and you're helping somebody else build the training, or even if you're trying to improve your own process, building a standard operating procedure, going through the process of documenting what you're doing and doing things like time studies, all affect your efficiency and can help you train somebody. Even if you're not training somebody now, you're going to hire down the road. You will be prepared to do that if you build up that training yourself on the way. And never, never underestimate, never shirk that time to take your moment with the machine, to take your moment with the materials, and to get that embroidery experience. Run the machine. Get the material into the needle, watch it run, stay curious. Embroidery experience is going to trump everything else when it comes down to solidifying lessons. You're going to need education? Absolutely, you're going to need education. You need education more than you think you do. And I think, honestly, it can stop you from doing all of the trial and error that is frustrating, that takes the fun, that takes the curiosity, that takes the creativity out of this thing. Education is important. But what is going to solidify and make that stick permanently is experience at the machine. And when it isn't the stuff that we do at the machine, when it's interacting with customers, when it's discussing the realities of embroidery with somebody and helping them achieve their goals, whether they are promotional or aesthetic, whatever it is that they're trying to get out of embroidery, the repetition, getting out and making those discussions happen, talking to people about things even when they are difficult so that you can establish good expectations, that's the experience that's part of this too. And yes, soft skills are a big part of that, but so are reps. Just getting in the repetition, doing the job, stepping out past that comfort zone, because on the other side of that fear is the best work you are ever going to do. All right, folks, with that, I think we have certainly got it done. I think that was a fair amount to go, but what I'm hoping for is that you guys got something out of it. Maybe some of you folks are going to go check out stuff like the Facebook groups. Like Cindy says, the Facebook groups are wonderful. She loves seeing samples and neat projects. Maybe like Doug, you're recommending people to go out to the Embroiderers Expo, and he says anyone who hasn't gone should absolutely go. Yeah, get out to the expos. It's fantastic. And if nothing else, I'll just say this. Remember to enjoy and stay curious about the process you're doing. That is infectious to the people that you train, that you hire. And if nothing else, it brings you back to the reason you did the thing in the first place and brings you back to the joy you could be having, both creatively and professionally, in doing the work. Get out there, make something cool, stay curious, and I can't wait to see you guys again next week.